Well, welcome everyone, and first start by introducing myself. I'm Rhea George, the Managing Director with AIA Virginia. I have been the staff liaison to the Honors Committee since 2007, and it's one of my favorite jobs here working with AIA Virginia. I get to see all of the incredible work that is happening, all of the incredible people that are contributing to our built environment. I wanted to start off by just saying the honors program kind of first and foremost falls within AIA Virginia's public outreach portfolio, meaning its goal really is to elevate and bring awareness to those individuals and organizations that are contributing to the built environment in particularly meaningful and impactful ways. So I'm going to start with our learning objectives for the day. And I just want to overview a couple of things. So first, you want to understand each of the awards and how they are evaluated by the Honors Committee. Determine which is the best category for the individual organization you'd like to nominate. Describe really what the common elements or the common threads that we see in successful nominations. We'll take a look at a few examples from last year, and then quickly touch on your role as a nominator. Now, there'll be time at the end to answer any questions you may have, but certainly please feel free to unmute yourself at any point during the presentation and ask a question or submit your question on the chat tool. So we're going to start first with the awards categories, and just for simplicity's sake, I kind of divided those into public awards and professional awards. And by public, I mean those awards that are designed to recognize people or organizations that are not eligible for membership in the AIA. And by professional awards, I just mean those where membership in the AIA is a requirement. Those are the awards that we give to architects and associate AIA members. I'm going to start with the public awards, and just to sort of get a flavor of the kinds of folks that you might want to consider nominating for these. The folks might include artisans or authors, critics or journalists, craftspeople, activists, code officials, those consultants that you work with on your projects, or educators, lawyers or legislators or policymakers that impact the built environment, planners or responsible developers, philanthropists who've contributed to the built environment in meaningful ways, photographers, preservationists, archivists, researchers, any number of types of individuals. This is by no means a comprehensive list, but really just something to get your creative juices flowing, if you will. So the first award I want to touch on today is AIA Virginia Honors. And this award can be presented to either an individual or an organization, and it's really intended to recognize those who have contributed to the profession or the built environment in notable ways. So it can be up to 5 awards can be given each year. And you'll note that people who have been awarded honorary membership are not eligible for this award. In the early 90s, several awards categories were combined to create this award category. So prior to 1993, the Society presented separate awards for allied professions, craftsmen. There were special awards presented for research and education, engineering, landscape planning, building products, equipment, furniture, design, and manufacturing, or legislation and architectural criticisms or writings. So they evaluated the program and really determined that this sort of umbrella category could do the trick. So when taking a look at the nominees, these criteria, while not formalized in the rules of the board regarding honors, tend to be the ones that the committee looks at as they're considering your nominee. So is the work Virginia-based? Is there impact to the region or the entire state? If it's local work, can it be a model for other efforts across the Commonwealth? And how long has this nominee been engaged in the work for which you're nominating them? And I thought it would be helpful to show the last 10 years of nominees in each of these categories that we'll be reviewing today. However, I just want to point out that, you can see the nominees for the entire awards history on AIA Virginia's website. And so one thing I'd want to note, before submitting a nomination, you want to check not only the eligibility requirements, but also make sure they haven't received the award already, because I've seen that happen before. The next category I want to review is honorary membership. And this category looks pretty similar to AIA Virginia Honors, but there are a few differences I want to point out. So first, this award is conferred upon individuals, so organizations are not eligible for it. The next is a little bit more subtle. This is really intended to recognize a service that's been sustained over time. Whereas AIA Virginia Honors can be used to recognize a singular achievement or a series of achievements, honorary membership really recognizes long-term service to the built environment or the profession. So there's no hard and fast rule about how long that service would be, but I've heard 10 years referenced as a good baseline. It is conferred for a lifetime, so unless it is deliberately revoked by the board, you'll want to make sure that the nominee is someone you want to see affiliated with the AIA for the long haul. And you'll recall that someone who has received honorary membership is not eligible for AIA Virginia Honors, the category we just reviewed a moment ago. So it's not overtly stated, but I sort of consider that if the AIA Virginia Honors is sort of the introductory level, this is the next tier, if you will. But these evaluative criteria are really similar. I think that the big sort of pivot point you'd want to think about when deciding between, say, honors or honorary membership is that length of service. And here are 10 years of nominees, so a pretty impressive group here, and you can see that it's a wide range of individuals. So we've got some engineers and historians, we've got educators and legal counsel. So the next award I want to touch on is the Architecture Medal for Virginia Service. And its honorary membership is sort of tier 2. The Architecture Medal is the very top tier, so the platinum level award. I sort of liken it to a Lifetime Achievement Award. It is our most prestigious public award that we present. And it can be used to recognize an individual or an organization. And I've bolded the words unusually significant contribution to Virginia's built environment, because that's really what this award is intended to recognize. And again, these evaluative criteria are real similar to those that are used in the other categories. But when considering nominating someone for this award, you really want to think about their efforts and their impact. So is the impact really statewide, or maybe even it extends beyond Virginia and can be used as a model in other states, or even has national impact? Does their work really extend beyond that sort of normal scope of work you might expect someone to be doing in their role? So for example, say you're considering nominating a preservationist. Do they serve on their professional society or related organizations? Do they volunteer outside of their typical professional responsibilities to support the built environment in some way? Do they publish research, or have they been interviewed by publications so that their work has broader impact and can be used again as a model for others' efforts? And maybe they lecture or present their work in universities or to the profession. So if the answers to those questions are yes, this is probably a pretty good candidate for the Architecture Medal. If not, it may be better suited for one of the other categories. So if you've seen, some of the previous honorees have gone on to later be awarded with the Architecture Medal for Virginia service. So you can see the last 10 years of honorees, and again, we have some individual or multiple individuals or organizations that have been recognized. So moving on to professional awards, this set of awards is really intended to elevate the visibility of members in Virginia doing notable work and to really hold them up as examples of the best that the profession has to offer. And so things to consider before nominating is, are they an assigned member of AIA Virginia, meaning is AIA Virginia or a local component their primary membership? Or have they received other professional awards or public recognition or publication of their work? So the first award I want to cover in here really kind of straddles those two. I debated as to whether to put it in the public or professional awards because it's a little bit of both. So this award is generally presented to the building owner to recognize their investment in good design. However, in practice, it really can be the design firms that benefit from the public recognition. One thing to point out, the nominee for the test of time can be a single structure or a group of buildings that sort of comprise a single project. And the way that it's evaluated is it really between 25 and 50 years old. It was really modeled after what they call the 25-year-old award, the 25-year award at the national level. And that's really from the date of initial construction. So for this year, 2020, you'd want to consider nominating buildings completed between 1970 and 1995. And if you are a member of a chapter's honors committee, you might want to look back into your awards archives for those time frames. So, what buildings were recognized with design awards in that range, and has that design held up over time? Does it contribute to the community in a meaningful way? And so in looking at these evaluative criteria, I want to point out something. So when this award was revised just a handful of years ago following an evaluation by a work group led by Marvin Cantor, the word substantial was added. And I'll go back here to the test of time. So, is it standing as originally designed in appearance and in good condition? It hasn't been modified in a substantial way. And that was really to leave a little bit of wiggle room to accommodate for adaptive use while still ensuring that the original design was respected. And here are the 10 years of nominees. So I'm going to move on here to the Award for Distinguished Achievement. And this award has new language, so I really want to take a second to point that out. So in 2019, last year, an honors committee diversity task force was formed to study the awards program and the composition of the honors committee. And one of their recommendations was that we revise the award for distinguished achievement to broaden the definition of the award so it clearly recognizes social responsibility. And so after some evaluation in April, the AIA Virginia Board of Directors accepted a motion from the Outreach Advisory Council to revise the language to what you see here. So it can be an award that recognizes a singular achievement by an architect or the work of an entire career. And there's a list of potential reasons why you would want to nominate someone for their work in those areas. So design, practice, education, service as a citizen architect or to the profession, or someone who has really engaged passionately in initiatives to advance social justice, equity, diversity, or inclusion. And you can see the evaluative criteria. Again, is it Virginia-based? What is the impact? How much work has been produced and for how long a period? And what is the impact that this award might have on fellow professionals when it's presented? And here are the last 10 years of honorees. Pretty impressive bunch. So the Virginia Emerging Professional Award is not that old. It was only about 5 years. And there was actually some debate over whether this category was necessary, since nominees could reasonably be submitted for the Award for Distinguished Achievement. However, in reality, many younger leaders weren't being nominated or elected to decline to be nominated because it seemed like they were really competing against professionals, sometimes being nominated for the work of an entire career. And after our evaluation, the organization felt it was really important to provide opportunities for recognition for younger leaders. So this award was created in 2015, and it was really modeled directly after the Award for Distinguished Achievement. So when we revised that language this year, we also revised this language to include that work for social justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this category has slightly more complex eligibility rules, so I really want to take a moment to call them out here. So the candidates must be an assigned associate or architect member of AIA Virginia who's graduated from an accredited school of architecture no more than 15 years ago. So you really need to know when this individual has graduated when pulling together the nomination to make sure that they're eligible. And again, those evaluative criteria are very similar to the ones that are used for the Award for Distinguished Achievement. Obviously, though, the length of time of service or their work is typically reduced. And here are the last 5 years of nominees, and again, a really incredible bunch of professionals. So our next category is the T. David Fitzgibbon Firm Award, and this award is given to recognize a firm that has consistently produced distinguished architecture for at least 10 years. Only one award is given each year. And the evaluative criteria that the committee looks at here, are a little bit more in depth. So is the firm Virginia-based? And if you are nominating a firm that also has offices outside Virginia, the nomination should really have the distinct and clear focus on the work that is originating from the Virginia office, because we've had several firms recently nominated where that became a topic of discussion among the committee. They know that these firms may have multiple offices, and is the work that's being shown being generated out of the Virginia firm or being led by individuals that are based in the Virginia firm, or is it, say, maybe being generated from an office outside the state, and it's really not a Virginia-based effort. So if you're pulling together a nomination for a Fitzgibbon Firm Award, or make sure to make that very clear. So has the firm been recognized with design awards or other recognition? If the work's been published, make note of it. And what is the breadth and scope of their built work? So show various typologies and styles, the work in different sectors. If the firm is really specialized, and really point out the depth of expertise within that sector. And, make note, are they meeting the needs of their clients? Are they sensitive to context? Or, are they responsible stewards of the of environmental resources? Are they investing in their firm to make sure that they have a diverse and inclusive and equitable environment? And do they invest in the profession by encouraging leadership through service to the AIA or other professional organizations? Do they encourage volunteerism in the community or support service as citizen architects? Yeah, so I see Nick has submitted a question, asking me to elaborate on what is defined as Virginia-based. This is a really great question. I think pointing out, if you are sharing examples of this firm's work, or even if you're nominating individuals, since it's really team effort, make sure that you're pulling examples that Virginia designers and the Virginia firm have worked on. Again, we know that quite often firms will collaborate across state lines, but when you are pointing out that work, it's helpful to note. I think that the committee has sometimes been reluctant to pursue an award if it's not clear that the work that's being shown in the submission is coming out primarily from the Virginia office. Does that make things more clear? Please feel free to unmute yourself or add that into the chat. Okay, perfect, great. So I'm going to move on here to take a look at the last 10 years of honorees, and you will see this is a pretty slim list. We've only got 5 firms recognized, and there wasn't an award presented between the years 2011, so you see Commonwealth Architects here, one in 2011, and then 2017 was when Fraser Associates in Stanton was recognized. So really, frankly, there were quite a few years where the committee was split between nominations and couldn't get the minimum vote threshold. And as years went past and no awards were given, nominations started to slow down. So the committee took note of this and committed itself to encouraging nominations and really finding ways to navigate a debate in new ways that still allowed for spirited discussion, but less deadlock. And so over the last 3 years, this award has been presented to some pretty deserving firms. So the next category, and this is the last one, is the William C. Noland Medal. And it's presented in honor of the memory of William C. Noland, who was one of the founders of the AIA Virginia. It's the second chapter president and Virginia's first member to be elevated to fellowship. And so if the Architecture Medal for Virginia Service is a lifetime achievement for members of the public, I would say this would be its mirror for a professional. And of course, your nominee doesn't need to be nearing retirement to be eligible, but they do need to have some substantial experience under their belt. So, you know, have they been contributing to the built environment in Virginia for at least 10 years? Are they consistent members of the AIA? Is there a breadth and depth to their work, and really do they go above and beyond just doing their job? And so what's their body of accomplishments? And some things that you can focus and touch on as you're pulling together a nomination is highlighting their work and any of the awards and recognition that they received for it. Highlighting, you know, have they been a leader within their practice? Did they work to create a fair, equitable, diverse firm? You know, are they a leader in management? Do they contribute to the professional discourse in meaningful ways? You know, meaning did they present lectures or serve on crits? They work with schools, you know, were they a jury chair, or did they contribute to publications? Do they do public outreach? Do they serve as mentors for other professionals? You know, have they supported the AIA through volunteer work? Have they served as a citizen architect and volunteered in the community? So these are all things that you may want to touch on when pulling together a nomination to really highlight that individual's leadership. And so looking at the last 10 years of nominees, you'll note I put a star next to Mary Cox's name. This award was first presented in 1967 to J. Everett Faber Jr. And Mary is the very first woman to have been awarded with the Noland in 2011. And to date, there has yet to be a person of color that's been awarded with this. So hopefully by now you've got a pretty solid understanding of what each award is intended to recognize, and you have a good idea of which category is the right one for your nominee. But I just wanted to pause here and see if there are any questions before I go on to describe some of the common elements of successful nominations. Feel free to chime in on the chat or unmute yourself and let me know. Okay, great. So first I want to take a look at what the submission materials are. So each submission consists of a nomination form, the nominator statement, narrative information, supporting materials, and letters of support. So the nomination form is super straightforward. You know, we've got the nominator's contact information. So your contact info, your name, phone number, email, mailing address, those are all required fields. So if your nominee is recognized, we can get in touch with you and let you know. Then the nominee's contact information. So again, name, address, phone number. Email is not required on that section of the form, but it is helpful. Again, it's just communicating once a nominee has been recognized so that we can be in direct touch with them. And then, of course, you must select the award category and then upload your complete nomination packet. So the first thing typically that the committee would look at in a nomination is the nominator statement. And it should be brief, your executive summary, if you will, your elevator speech about why this nominee should win. And you know, usually I recommend keeping it to just a paragraph or two and really hit on how the nominee meets the evaluative criteria. So super concise and directly relating to why the nominee should win this award. Then the narrative information, and this is really the meat of your nomination. And this is the information you want to include here might vary a bit depending on your award category. And where your nominator's statement is brief, here's where you'll want to describe in detail, or at least more detail, the nominee's qualifications and how they meet the evaluative criteria. And of course, as with much of human communication, crafting a story is really one of the best ways of getting your point across. The most effective nominations I've seen do this really well, and I'll show you a couple of examples shortly. So just putting in a list of accomplishments can be effective, but weaving those into a narrative is really much more effective. So you want to detail how that nominee is meeting those criteria. And so is your nominee a person? So you might want to think about, if so, you might want to think about including their resume and their CV and citing their professional accomplishments and recognition, any awards or publications, and you know, point out any lectures and talks they've given and describe how they've maybe served on boards or volunteered in the community. If you're nominating a firm, you know, summarize their design and firm management philosophy, show their work and cite their awards and describe their approach to professional leadership. And really, I'd say the same would go if you're nominating an organization. And here is where I would stop there and say, you know, where relevant. So you may need to pick and choose some elements that are really highlighting the nominee's best work and eliminate some things that aren't related to the awards criteria. So we had to limit the nomination packets to 20 pages because nominators are really taking what I would say, you know, call it a kitchen sink approach and throwing everything into the mix, whether it was really relevant to the award or not. And we were receiving, you know, 50 and 60 page nominations, which became, you know, really quite burdensome for the honors committee and kind of an overload of information. We also limited the file size to 15 megabytes, and that was really to try and make the files accessible to the members of the honors committee. And finally, and I can't stress this piece enough, is that, you know, you have to remember that the committee is made up of architects. So they're a visual bunch, you know, so include images wherever possible, present the information in an orderly way. This doesn't mean you have to have a huge marketing department or hire someone to create a super polished package, but the reality is the aesthetics do matter. So just take a few moments to consider the design of the package as well. So one thing I always encourage folks is to remember that the submission will be viewed on a screen. You know, so gone are the days of the actual booklets that folks used to send in. So the committee is either looking at this on their desktop or seeing it projected onto a screen when they meet together. Is your print large enough to read? So I have seen packages that have opted to lower the text size to cram in as much information as possible, but it made it really difficult for the committee members to read. I've seen nominations that don't include any images, and heard of nominations where, you know, someone just pulled a few paragraphs off of a website and didn't really include much more in the way of narrative. And so just remember, the committee needs enough detail to make a reasonable comparison to other nominees. So they shouldn't have to go out and do independent research, although I will say I have seen them go out and do that when the nomination packages really aren't as complete as they should be. And then sort of the final component are the letters of support. So each nomination should have at least one letter of support beyond just the nominator's statement. Some of those, you know, the medals and the firm award, I usually recommend doing all 5. And the letter writers make a difference. So think about who to invite to submit a letter of support. And you can, you know, counsel them to craft the letters that, you know, so briefly describe their relationship with the candidate and then really speak to how the candidate meets the evaluative criteria. And I'll pretty frequently get questions about whether letters of support should be sent to the honors committee chair or directly to me as a staff person or to the nominator. And I will usually recommend that the nominator collect all the letters of support and submit the package as a whole. If they're sent to me or the chair, I'm very happy to bundle them in with the submission so they can be viewed by the committee. But to guarantee that they're included in the submission, I'd encourage you to collect them, because otherwise you really don't know, did they arrive in time or at all? You know, maybe, you know, did they arrive by the deadline? So it really just to make sure that you've got your complete package, I recommend you send them to her or to you directly. And then you might want to consider having them address the letter simply to the generic honors committee chair. You can always, of course, use the committee chair's name, but pretty frequently in competitive categories, it's nice to just be able to reuse that letter of support rather than going back to the nominator to ask for a revision. Although that's not entirely necessary. I have seen many successful nominations come through that use the letter of support from an original nomination that may have been submitted 3, 4, 5 years earlier. So before okay, so I've got a good question in. So someone in the audience asked, are the letters of support only for members of the AIA? No, those can be from clients, they can be from colleagues, they can be from nonprofits, so they do not have to be written by a member. However, nominators must be members of the AIA. So that's a great question. I wanted to show you a couple of great examples from last year. But before I do that, are there any other questions about putting together the packet before what needs to be included before I go on to the examples? Okay, so I'm going to show 2 examples from last year that I think did a pretty good job of telling their nominee's story. And the first one is Henry Wheeler. And forgive the sort of low quality version of this, I just saved the nomination as an image. But this is an excellent example of a nomination that crafts a really beautiful story. It's not super flashy, but it has lots and lots of heart. You can see the nominator statement really told the story of why this individual contributed in a really meaningful way. Particularly if you don't have a lot of images to draw from, and this individual was much older. He did not have digital images in his archive that he could share with his nominator. I think primarily this was a surprise. So the nominator went back to old yearbooks and cropped images out of them. So again, if you don't have a lot of photos, your narrative is going to lead the way. And this particular nomination really tells the story of a man who is committed to his students and who nurtured generations of future architects. And so you can see it's very simple. The one critique I would have here is maybe make the text just a little bit larger. And then it included some really compelling letters of support from students that this educator taught. And I will tell you, it pulled at the heartstrings of many of our honors committee members, and I heard a number of them say it's the best nomination they had ever seen. And again, you can see it was not super polished, but it had a great story. The next one I want to share is a little bit more polished, but it does a really terrific job of highlighting the nominees' accomplishments and how they met the evaluative criteria. So this is our Noland winner from last year, Bob Moget. And here you can see, it's image forward. I'd say this nominator statement might be a little bit longer than I would recommend, but it does a really nice job of summarizing Bob's accomplishments. It's pretty tricky to narrow down a sort of a career-long, an entire career's worth of effort into a couple of paragraphs. But it highlights his work in a really great way. It also humanizes him by, highlighting the relationships with his colleagues and his family, and has organized his accomplishments in a great way. I have included every page of the nomination, but I've included most of it as sort of in the interest in time. I pulled a few of the key components, and it presents his professional accomplishments in really meaningful ways and sprinkling in great images, organizing the text in a visually pleasing way. He carefully selects examples from his work to highlight his approach to design excellence and showing his selected awards and recognition and his scholarly work, the work that he's done in the community. And I just pulled, a few examples of his work and the letters of support. So, we talked a moment or two ago about who those letters of support can come from. Again, this is one from a client. There were a number of letters of support from clients. And then here's an example of a letter of support from a colleague. And again, sort of asking those folks to summarize their relationship with the nominee and, saying, you don't want to say, hey, Bob's a great guy. You want to say, here's why Bob is a great candidate for this award. And then your role as a nominator is not particularly burdensome, but there are a few things that you want to be responsible for. So obviously you want to provide information that's accurate and truthful to the best of your ability. I know you will very likely be relying on others or public information to pull together the nomination. If your nominee is put forward and is going to win awards, I will need your help of getting high resolution images to be used in all of our public recognition efforts. And then this is an important one. Attend the awards event to act as host. So and the reason I add this in is, I think back, there were a handful of years ago, we had a great landscape architect that was recognized, and his nominator wasn't able to attend the event, and he didn't know anyone at the event, and there was really nobody there to help make sure that he was having a good experience. So, when you are nominating someone, make sure that you plan to be there to help, introduce your nominee to folks, to encourage conversation, to make them feel, really welcomed and honored during the event. And really, that is it. But a few other items I just wanted to note before opening it up, more widely to questions is, the Honors Committee takes their job very seriously, and really is, it protects the integrity of the awards fiercely. So you see that the maximum number of awards were not necessarily presented in each category every year. In fact, as you saw, there were some that years where no awards were presented in a particular category. So quite often, there may be nominees that the committee doesn't feel are worthy of elevating, or perhaps there were no nominees in that category. That's happened as well. But some of these categories are incredibly, incredibly competitive. And so if your nominee isn't recognized the first go round, it is not unusual. In fact, it's for the really competitive categories. I have seen people submitted, 4 or 5 years in a row. That does not mean they're not worthy. It really, in my experience and seeing the committee work, it is coming down to splitting of hairs as to which tips, which elements might tip the category in favor of one individual organization or another. Because by the time they are being put forward to be nominated for an award, they're generally pretty accomplished individuals. So the one other thing I'd point out is current board members are not eligible for these awards. That's just because these are coming from the board of directors. So I'll pause here and see if anybody has questions, things that I did not touch on that you were hoping to learn today. Again, feel free to take yourself off mute and ask directly, or to add the questions into chat. All right, I'm not seeing a lot of questions. One other thing that I just thought I would point out is, you can always find the names of the Honors Committee on the awards page of AIA Virginia's website. You can also always give me a call or shoot me an email if you've got a question. And additionally, if you want to put someone who's been charged with writing a letter in touch with me to ask any questions, I'm always happy to do that as well. So I'm not seeing a lot of questions that are coming in. So I want to thank you all. Oh, that's a great, that's a great question. What is the deadline for this year? I'm going to pull it up just to verify. I believe it is July 1, but I don't want to trust my memory. I should have included that this year. And typically the process for advancing a nomination is I will receive all of them. Then I check to make sure that the nomination is eligible in the category, that it is complete. If it comes in before the deadline and there's something missing, or maybe I think, hey, it's not eligible for this category, but it is for the other, then I will reach out in advance. If it comes in, at 5 p.m. on that deadline, that's sort of it. So if you can get your things in a little bit early, it's always better. The deadline for this year is July 1 at 5 p.m. The nomination form and uploader is on AIA Virginia's website at aiava.org. And once I collect all of those nominations, make sure they are eligible, I organize them for the committee into the various categories and transmit them usually within a couple of days, which gives the committee a few weeks to read through all of the nominations. Sometimes we'll get anywhere from 15 to 25 nomination packets. We try to give them as much time as possible. The committee generally will get together, usually in person. This year we'll be meeting virtually. The meeting will take place over one day, but we've built in a break for people. And then the committee will make its decisions. There are some voting requirements. They need to have a quorum. And then for some awards, 67% of the attendees need to vote in favor of it in order for it to be advanced. In some categories, 80%. So that ends up being almost 100% of the attendees if the quorum is just barely met And then once the committee has prepared their recommendations, it comes forward to the board for a vote. And then the board of directors, can opt to modify the recommendations of the honors committee. So that's truly what they are recommendations. I did have one other question that came in. So if a nomination is submitted but not advanced, can it be reused the next cycle? And that answer is absolutely. If you want feedback on it, or you've got questions about it, you can always ask me, give me a call. And again, I would generally encourage folks to resubmit. Often, if there was a component of a nomination that, say, the committee felt was incomplete, or they wanted more information, or they had questions about a particular thing, I will usually make note of that and reach out to the nominator to say, hey, this is a good nomination, but maybe next time could you collect a few images of this type of work? So that's a really great question, and again, I'm always happy to do my best to answer any questions. The committee itself, the composition of the committee is such that it changes every year. So a few folks roll off of it and a few folks roll on. So the personality of the committee can vary. The chair really can have an impact on, sort of how they choose to drive the work of the committee, but the personalities on the committee itself, things that are important to some people may be less important to others. So it's really a fresh eyes. We'll be looking at each nomination each year, although generally not 100% fresh eyes. Once the board makes its decision, I generally will have letters to the honorees ready to drop into the mail the day the board meets. And from there, we sort of enter into a process of, I wait a few days for those letters to get into the hands of the honorees. The board is asked to keep things confidential until the awards are announced publicly. But after that, I'll reach out to the nominator and the nominees, and we'll sort of begin the work of collecting all the information that is used in our public recognition of each of the honorees. Any other questions or comments to add about the program or pulling together a nomination? Okay. Well, great. Well, thank you all for joining me today. If you think of anything else, I am always standing at the ready to answer any questions or interpret rules. And if I, am not clear on the answer, I sort of elevated up the chain. So I hope everyone has a terrific day, and I am really looking forward to seeing all of your fantastic nominations. Thanks so much.